Hi, my name is Maria, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the story of my transformation from being a person that was full of self-loathing to becoming a person that has much more compassion for myself. I grew up on the beach in Del Mar, California, in a bikini, and definitely learned to find my self-worth in what I looked like, what my body looked like, and what other people told me about myself. And I never learned to really fill myself up from the inside. And the way that I figured out that I had a lot of self-loathing going on was that I was reading a book one day, probably about 7 years ago, and one of the exercises that I was told to try was to look in the mirror and say, Maria, I love you. And literally, it was one of the hardest things I had ever done in my life. I completely didn't believe myself, and I knew right then and there that I had some work to do. The other way that I was able to recognize my self-loathing was that I noticed one day that when I would get up in the morning and I'd go use the bathroom, I would find my shoulders up to here every single day. And I was having a hard time like taking a breath all the way in. And so what I started doing at that point was becoming curious and listening to my self-talk. And I would find I'd be standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes, and 95% of my thoughts were totally negative about my life, and they were mostly blaming other people for how my life had turned out. And I was very judgmental of other people. Definitely found myself defending and proving why I was how I was, and I really was living on what I call the triangle, the victim, the persecutor, the rescuer. I was always in one of those places, and I became really obsessed about food, couldn't stop thinking about food, especially after I went through some really hard traumatic life events about 6 years ago. Had a fourth child, lost my father-in-law, my dad had a massive stroke, went through bankruptcy, lost our home, really just almost lost my marriage. Really traumatic events, and I really, really noticed it then and have been working on it ever since. At that point, I was always looking for outside validation. So what I wore was so important. My hair, my body. I worked out so hard. I was so hard on myself about what I ate. And then I wake up every morning mad at myself for what I didn't do, what I thought was perfectly. So I ended up having to change my entire paradigm, because what I realized was that my entire focus was on what I wasn't and how I could become something other than I was. And because I was so unhappy with who I was and so insecure. And so now what I've learned to do is begin unfolding all that I am and realizing that I'm completely unique from every other person on the planet, and I'm not supposed to be like anybody else. I am supposed to find out who I am and use my gifts to serve mankind in the best way that I can, given the gifts that God gave me. So the way that I've really done that was recognizing my self-loathing, and then becoming very curious about my self-loathing and trying to figure out what was going on, and then becoming compassionate with myself and becoming just completely vulnerable, really honest with myself about the hard things that I was thinking and believing. And I've definitely gone back to do some looking into my childhood and beliefs that I took on as truths that have completely affected me in my adult life, and have spent a lot of time healing wounds from my childhood and recreating new beliefs that serve me instead of serve to destroy me. So I'm a much happier person now because I'm finding that my love is coming from me, from the inside, and I'm not grasping for everyone else to accept me, which caused a lot of anxiety in my life because I was terrified that somebody wouldn't accept me. And I was just giving my power away constantly. And now I've been able to take my power back and become responsible for my own life and my own happiness.